It was a warm Friday evening, and the city's skyline shimmered under the fading sun. Malcolm Reed and his wife, Camille, arrived at Vivre, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. Dressed in an impeccable dark blue suit, Malcolm exuded the quiet confidence of a man who had worked his way to the top. His tech startup, Reed Innovations, had just landed a multi-million-dollar deal, marking another major milestone in his already impressive career. Camille, equally striking in an emerald green dress, was fresh off a victory of her own, a landmark case in which she defended a young woman who had been wrongfully arrested due to racial profiling. As one of the top civil rights lawyers in the state, Camille had built a reputation as a formidable advocate for justice, her name whispered with both admiration and fear within legal circles. Tonight was meant to be a celebration, a moment to reflect on their successes, both personal and professional. The couple had reserved a table at Vivre weeks in advance, anticipating this moment. Perched atop a towering building, the restaurant boasted floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Its reputation extended beyond just the food. It was a place where the wealthy and influential gathered, sealing deals over fine wine and five-course meals. As they approached the entrance, Malcolm glanced at Camille with a grin. "Ready to toast to another win?" he asked, his voice filled with pride. Camille chuckled softly, tucking a strand of her curly hair behind her ear. "I've been looking forward to this all week. Let's make it a night to remember." The host station stood just inside the opulent glass doors. The interior of Vivre radiated luxury, white linens draped over each table, chandeliers casting a warm, inviting glow, and patrons seated in intimate booths. The air was filled with the soft clink of silverware and the hushed conversations of high society. Everything about the restaurant suggested exclusivity. However, as Malcolm and Camille stepped forward, something shifted. The host, a tall, middle-aged man in a perfectly pressed black suit, glanced up from his podium. His eyes landed on the couple, and for a fraction of a second, his welcoming smile faltered. He looked them up and down, his once cordial demeanor cooling like a summer breeze turned bitter. "Good evening," Malcolm greeted, offering his signature smile, the one that could disarm even the toughest business opponents. "We have a reservation under Reed." The host's eyes flicked to the reservation list. His fingers hovered over the page, but instead of greeting them with the enthusiasm one would expect for high-paying customers, he hesitated. After what felt like an unnecessary pause, he looked up, a feigned polite expression forming on his face. "I'm sorry, sir," he said, his voice formal but laced with something that immediately set Malcolm on edge. "It seems there's been a mistake. We're fully booked tonight." Malcolm frowned, glancing past the host into the dining area. His sharp eyes immediately noticed several empty tables scattered throughout the restaurant. "That's strange," Malcolm said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of suspicion. "I made this reservation weeks ago. Are you sure?" The host's smile tightened. "Unfortunately, we've had some last-minute bookings. It's a busy night. Perhaps you'd like to come back another time?" Camille's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. As someone who had spent her career dealing with prejudice in its many forms, she recognized this for what it was, the casual dismissal, the thinly veiled condescension. She had seen it before, often directed at people who didn't fit a certain mold. But tonight was supposed to be about celebration, and she wasn't ready to let this host's attitude ruin their night just yet. "We have a reservation," Camille said firmly, her voice calm but authoritative. "Please check again." The host's expression didn't change, but the tension between them became palpable. He looked down at the reservation list once more, flipping through the pages as if searching for an excuse. After a moment, he sighed, shaking his head. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but as I said, we are fully booked. There's nothing I can do." Malcolm, now visibly irritated, exchanged a glance with Camille. He could feel the weight of every eye in the lobby on them, curious, disinterested, or perhaps knowingly avoiding the scene. It wasn't the first time they'd encountered this kind of treatment, but it never got any easier. Still, Malcolm kept his voice measured, unwilling to let the situation escalate just yet. "Can we speak to the manager?" he asked, his jaw tightening slightly. The host's smile disappeared entirely. "There's no need for that. I assure you, We don't have any tables available tonight. Malcolm was about to push further when Camille gently touched his arm. It's fine, she whispered, though her eyes were anything but calm. Let's just go somewhere else. Malcolm hesitated, feeling the injustice of the situation burn in his chest. But Camille's presence was a calming force. He sighed, nodding reluctantly. All right, he muttered, his voice low with frustration. Let's go. As they turned to leave, the host's eyes followed them, a smug sense of triumph glinting in his gaze. What he didn't realize, what none of the staff realized, was that this night wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Malcolm and Camille weren't the type to let such things slide, and soon, they would make sure that Vivre regretted the way it treated its customers. The cool night air hit them as they stepped out, offering a stark contrast to the heat of frustration boiling inside. The city bustled around them, but for Malcolm, everything felt muted by what had just transpired. They weren't even subtle about it, Malcolm muttered, his voice simmering with frustration. How many times do we have to deal with this nonsense? Camille sighed, rubbing her thumb over the back of his hand in reassurance. More than we should, that's for sure. But let's not let them ruin our night. We could go somewhere else. There are plenty of places around here that would love to have us. Malcolm stopped walking, his eyes narrowing as he glanced back at the entrance of Vivre. It's not about finding another place, Camille. It's the principle. We had a reservation, and they turned us away like we didn't belong. Camille understood. She always did. Her calm exterior was the result of years of navigating these very situations. The subtle, everyday racism that tried to undermine everything they had worked for. But she knew Malcolm was right. It wasn't just about a missed dinner. It was about being treated as less than, despite all they had achieved. Despite their success, their titles, and their wealth, they were still being judged by the color of their skin. I know, Camille said softly, her voice steady but tinged with the same frustration. Believe me, I know. Just as they were about to walk away, something made Malcolm pause. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed another couple approaching the restaurant. White, mid-30s, dressed casually in jeans and blazers. The same host who had just denied them service greeted the couple with a wide, welcoming smile. Good evening. Welcome to Vivre. Do you have a reservation? The man chuckled, shaking his head. No reservation tonight. Just hoping you have a table for two. The host nodded, flipping through his reservation book for a brief moment before gesturing toward the open tables. Of course. We can accommodate you. Please, come right in. Malcolm's heart pounded in his chest. The scene played out in slow motion before his eyes. One set of rules for some and another for them. Without thinking, Malcolm turned back toward the entrance. Excuse me, Malcolm said, his voice calm but firm. You just told us you were fully booked, yet I just saw you seat that couple with no reservation. Care to explain that?